Alright guys, just gonna make something a little bit clear here. I am recovering from COVID. I don't think my voice is gonna go hoarse, but if it does, please forgive me. I'm trying to work around it. It's been about a week. I'm no longer feeling the serious symptoms, but I'm still testing positive and I'm still coughing quite a bit. So have some patience with me as you see me holding the remote in my hand. Bad production values. What else is new with Shoegazer Productions? Music of the Year 2001. Okay, time for the most generic fucking genre to cover, but we gotta cover it. Get ready for some of the best-selling titles of this year, and also some of the most mediocre and underwhelming. But also some of the best of the entire year, so it's not like this isn't worth watching at all. 2001 was still seeing that weird mixture of that R&B flavored style of bubblegum pop that we had during the entire 90s decade, while also starting to implement elements of electronic music introduced by Madonna and Kylie Minogue with their landmark albums. Pop music was heading in 10 different directions, and there's gonna be a lot of stuff on here that doesn't seem like it fits here, but the reason why I'm putting it here is because I can't think of any other place to put it. So without further ado, this is a massive frickin' section. Some of these albums you're gonna swear were released in 2002, but I assure you, they're late 01 releases, so they go here. Distance, Utada Hikaru. Alright, you weebs, go ahead, bitch at me in the comments. I know I didn't say that name correctly, but I'm not gonna sit here trying to correct myself for the next hour. Now, did you know that this album is actually one of the best-selling albums in 2001 on a global scale? Which is crazy, because you wouldn't expect to see Utada Hikaru alongside Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Blink-182. But that's something people didn't realize, is exactly how monumentally popular Utada Hikaru was. And still is. Like, she was selling out entire stadiums all around the frickin' world, not just in Japan. Which is strange because most people didn't become aware of her here in the States until her songs that she did for the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack. There's some really impressive groovy songs on here, and of course Utada still continues to carry the reputation that she has as one of the best vocalists ever recorded. There's nothing all too special, it's mostly generic pop, but it's good generic pop. I appreciated this thing. B+. Celebrity, NSYNC. Let's go ahead and get the obvious ones out of the way. Okay, here's a debate for you guys in the comments. Is this the very last NSYNC album, or is it the first Justin Timberlake solo album? I say that because the guy is front and center throughout the entirety of this album. Which isn't necessarily bad, because I actually think that those moments are some of the best moments on this thing. NSYNC was coming off of the heels of No Strings Attached, which was a huge success in and of itself from the previous year. However, Celebrity proved to just blow a lot of sales records right out of the water. However, even at the time, NSYNC was looking like it was heading towards the end, and this album really does feel like that. I've never been the biggest NSYNC fan to begin with, so this thing wasn't up my alley. But when you start hearing a lot of like the generic boy bands from the late 90s type of stuff, you just know what this thing is. Hearing Justin Timberlake beatboxing and hearing some of that more futuristic electro-pop in the album is good, but everything else is just like, why did they have to whip out the Michael Bolton synthesizers for a release from 2001? The ballads, man, the ballads are just too much for me to handle. C+. White Lilies Island, Natalie Imbruglia. Why the fuck is this thing here? Like, nobody remembers it, right? Well, the only reason why I felt the need to bring it up is because this is the first notable album that raised a bunch of controversy because of the copy protection that it had. See, when you put this CD into your computer to rip the files, you couldn't do that because you were met with this nice little software that stopped you from doing so. And it pissed people off. And that is all that this album is notable for, because if you try to listen to it otherwise, you're just like, yeah, that's an acoustic pop album, alright. I will say that there are two highlights. The single Wrong Impression is an adorable song. That Day is also a very great song to listen to if you're looking for something life-affirming. But other than that, it's just, yep, it's a pop album. What else can I say? C. It just sucks that Australia couldn't pump out any good pop albums this year. Fever, Kylie Minogue. Psych! I'm a fucking Kylie stan. Most of you guys know that already if you watched the 2 Beats Plus review of Kylie Minogue's entire discography. Or at least her entire discography up to 2015. Now this was Kylie Minogue's comeback album for everywhere outside of Europe. Her 1997 album Impossible Princess was a slight commercial failure. So when her 2000 release, Light Years, came around, people were stunned to see the new, sexier version of Kylie Minogue. But here in the States, we hadn't heard from her since the fucking Locomotion. Well, baby, don't do the Locomotion. Listen to this fucking thing. Easily my second favorite Kylie Minogue album. Some of her best songs are on here, and everything just, oh man, it makes you want to fucking dance, baby! The production's fantastic, Can't Get You Out of My Head is a classic. I mean, that gave me my sexual awakening when I was 13 years old. That outfit in that music video, oh man. Not to mention all the great synth hooks on here, such as on the title track and on Love at First Sight. And Burnin' Up, the closer track, oh god, that's been like one of the best closing tracks on any pop album, I swear. Not as great as Impossible Princess, but pretty damn close. A+. Daft Punk, Discovery. Oh dear, a lot of people are gonna say, what is this doing on the pop list? Well, most of you guys would call this pop music nowadays anyways. Yeah, this was the album that was supposed to go in the electronic music section, but I could only come up with a measly 2 albums for that. But this is the album most people cite as the most revolutionary album of 2001. Most of Daft Punk's most beloved songs come off of this album. Any of the first 5 Daft Punk songs you can name off the top of your head probably gonna be coming off of Discovery. And I really did like this thing. I thought I would get a little exhausted by it, but it actually changes things up quite nicely in between tracks. And that's something that you can really appreciate when it comes to Daft Punk. Now, they were definitely trying to shoot for something new after 1997's Homework. And what's also really impressive is that this thing has like a version of the album which is entirely animated. Just so much good stuff to say about this. I really liked the musical diversity, which is not something I would expect to say about a dance album. Easy, A+, give this thing a shot. Michael Jackson, Invincible. Oh, okay, we gotta address the elephant in the room because it's fucking Michael Jackson. Look, Michael Jackson has been accused several times of misdeeds done to children. And I know I'm euphemizing that pretty seriously. I'm just trying to avoid this video getting demonetized because of it. But yeah, we gotta make sure that we're constantly aware of that because after watching that documentary that was made about him, I forgot the name of it. Yeah, I'm pretty strongly convinced that there was some shit going on. Now, I'm not really the biggest Michael Jackson fan to begin with, because first off, everything that's been talked about has been rubbing me the wrong way. But second off, because I've just never been the biggest fan of his vocal style. The really rough and gruff vocal style's never really done it for me. Like how it sounds like he's squeezing his nuts to hit some of those notes. But if I had to choose a Michael Jackson album, Off the Wall would be the closest thing to an S tier for me. Thriller's pretty alright, but after that, you kinda lose me. And this album, why is this thing 77 minutes long? 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 It's almost as long as the production itself, am I right? But yeah, this thing was hyped as shit when it came out because it was Michael Jackson's first album in 6 years. Yeah, the previous album was called His Story, which is like one of the worst names for an album in the face of the fucking earth. And this album title isn't much better if you know what he was going for. He was invincible because he beat all of the accusations and didn't get charged with anything. That didn't age really well, did it? On top of that, it was one of the most expensive albums ever created, costing an estimated $30 million, which is something that hasn't even been topped. Yeah, if you thought it was ridiculous that Loveless rang the bell up, yeah, it's got nothing on this. This is like 30 times worse, literally 30 times worse. And there are so many guest appearances on here, it feels like Michael Jackson is like trying to appease people to a certain extent. Like there's a verse from the frickin' Notorious B.I.G. on here, who had already been dead for 4 years, and it just sounds like it was kinda like shoved in there and just didn't feel like it was in place at all. I'm not the biggest fan of this album. It's like 90% ballads and dance songs that outstay their welcome when they reach the 6 to 7 minute mark. It's just bloated. It's ridiculous. Like, couldn't he have at least made some cuts here and there? I mean, this thing could have been just a 50-minute, somewhat decent freaking pop album. It's not atrociously bad, I mean, it's listenable, but I was like sitting there checking my watch every 5 seconds, my non-existent watch on my wrist, and just being all like, is it done yet? Can I go home now? I know that some Michael Jackson heads really love this thing because they say that it like predated dubstep and some other musical movements, but for me, no thanks. Hard pass, C+ at best. Janet Jackson, All For You. Oh boy, another album by a Jackson sibling and another one that goes over the 70-minute mark. What's Randy gonna think of this one? Actually, I quite like this one. Yeah, I know out of the 2 Jackson siblings, Janet's the one I tend to lean to the most. Now, this album was a big controversial mess when it was first released. The swear words are very minimal on here, so it wasn't initially released with a parental advisory sticker. But when the album got banned in certain countries because the lyrics are still heavily sexual in nature even if they aren't like raunchy, well, yeah, they're gonna have to go ahead and slap that sticker on it anyways. And let me tell you, there are some moments on here where you're just because of how like overtly sexual she's being on this album, which isn't a bad thing at all. Some of the songs on here are just like on the Michael Jackson album, like way too fucking long. But they feel like they have more of a direction to them, and some of the songs are downright fucking good, like Somebody to Call My Lover. That sample is like, that's one of the best samples I've ever heard in pop music. Other major singles like All For You, I mean, it's alright, but I don't get why people were hyping it up so much on MTV. And just overall, I feel like the album is just solid, just good. And there's nothing wrong with that. All For You by Janet Jackson is a pretty solid pop album from 2001. B+. Alright, sorry about the sudden camera angle change and lighting change. I ended up having to split this shoot up into 2 separate days because of the COVID and because my camera battery died and my camera takes like 6 hours to charge. Zunderstood. Puh. Alright, that was just a bit of boomer humor to make fun of how it's stylized and spelled. It's Misunderstood by Pink. Now first off, let me preface this by saying that I understand completely how passionate Pink's fans are. It's astonishing the number of stories of all of the people pulled out of suicidal depression and the like, because she appeals to an LGBTQ+ audience. And she talks about some really traumatizing and troubling things in her lyrics sometimes, so it's very easy to empathize with her. So I want to make this clear, I'm not making a dig at Pink as a person, but some of the songs on this album I really don't like. When we start this album, we start off with a track where Pink sings and is having a good time, and actually I really like that track. But it's when we get to the next 3 tracks, which are 3 pretty well-known singles, that I start having some gripes. First off, there's Don't Let Me Get Me. Good luck getting that freaking melody out of your head. There were so many times over the past few months where I've just been trying to get that frickin' song out of my head. And she says the line, "Teachers dated me," which is like, really problematic. I don't think she was saying it in a way to like glorify it, but it definitely shows the type of trouble that she was in growing up. That being said, I've just never really been a big fan of that song. It's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, the way it's played off. And then we get This Party Started, which is like one of the most aggravating pop songs of 2001. I hate Get This Party Started so much, it's like a dog shit song, I swear. And then we get Just Like a Pill, which plays off like this drudgy, slimy mess of a song with these lyrics that, while they talk about something that is absolutely terrible that Pink had to go through, it still kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like, the metaphors and stuff like that are just weird. Not to mention the production is just sludgy and I don't like that song. But as we move along in the album, it actually does get significantly better. Pink has some really great pipes on her, and some of the songs on there are actually pretty touching. Especially the fourth single off of the album, Family Portrait, which is completely different than the other three well-known singles. And then you get the track with frickin' Steven Tyler from Aerosmith on it. I've never been a big fan of Steven Tyler, and after I read about what he did back in the 70s to that 14-year-old girl, I have even less of a reason to like him now. I don't know, that's not Pink's fault, but his presence on there definitely drags the song down. Overall, it's a pretty solid album with 3 very annoying tracks on it. B. Britney Spears. It's Britney, bitch. What else is there to say? Have you heard a Britney Spears album from the late 90s and early 2000s? Congratulations, because that's what this album is. It follows the formula. A couple of songs with vaguely sexual lyrics to get creepy old men turned on. Ballads, and more ballads. Cheesy production that has aged like milk. And I do believe Britney Spears is capable of writing good music. It's just, I don't think the first 3 albums represent that at all. Being Toxic's a great song, it just sucks that it's not on here. Overall, just a middling experience. I did like Justin Timberlake's appearance at the end, but that's about it. C. Poses, Rufus Wainwright. Alright, this one's really only here because I can't think of any other place to put it. Rufus Wainwright is one of my favorite musicians of all time. My favorite albums by him include Want 1 and Want 2, as well as that album that he wrote shortly after his mother passed away. He comes from a long line of family musicians. His father was a lounge singer, his mother was a folk singer, his sister is also pretty famous as a musician, Martha Wainwright. Most of you guys probably know him because of his rendition of Hallelujah, which for some reason is included on the Shrek soundtrack, but the version they chose in the movie was the John Cale version. This album is good with some of the best songs of Rufus's entire catalog presence, such as the hauntingly short In a Graveyard, the edgy Cigarettes and Chocolate Milk, and my personal favorite, Across the Universe, which is my favorite version of that classic Beatles track. Unfortunately, what it has in songwriting, it lacks in production. There are times where you just wish that there was just a little bit more oomph in the orchestrations. And for the record, Rufus is known for these lush, thick orchestrations that just blow you away. But here they just feel so underutilized. It's just, give me more of that. It's a solid album and worth your time, but I do think that the production holds it back significantly. B+. Laundry Service, Shakira. Okay, I definitely gotta visit Shakira's back catalog because I had no idea how beloved that woman is. Tons and tons of critically praised albums with lots of deep, thought-provoking concepts. Sadly, you're not gonna find much of that here. That's because this album was designed with an American audience in mind, and I guess they thought that Shakira would be better if she simplified her formula down. Underneath Your Clothes is another one of those cringy songs from the 2000s that I fucking despise. Wherever, Whenever, and The Objection Tango are both admittedly catchy songs, but from there we just get kind of forgettable Americanized Latin pop, and there's just no point to giving this album too much of a chance. Again, I'm gonna explore that back catalog because I am interested, but this album, not so much. C-. J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. Hey, do you like pop music? Well, I got a pop album for you. That's all I have to say, really? Love Don't Cost a Thing was a catchy song back in 2001, but hardly anybody remembers it. And the rest of the album is pretty similarly forgettable, but the biggest problem I have is that length. Why is this thing over an hour long? And I don't mind long albums, or even long pop albums for that matter, but there has to be something going on that catch me and keep my attention. Otherwise, you're just fooling around for an hour. And while that sounds like fun, not everyone wants to watch you do it. It sucks because Jennifer Lopez is actually a pretty fantastic actress, and she's aging like fine wine. But as a musician, not so much. C-. Vespertine, Bjork. Well, I've struggled with Bjork throughout my entire music listening career. And I've listened to Homogenic, I've listened to Post. Both of them just kinda weirded me out for their runtime, and that was it. So when I saw that there was a critically praised Bjork album that was popping up on a lot of Best of '01 lists, I was just like, oh great, time to be disappointed again. Well, I wasn't. Because if I bought the album, it means I love it. The melodies on here are so good, and I love those frosty textures all over the place. The echo, the reverb, this is such a wintry sounding album, and that's probably part of why I love it so much. It's like Enya's Shepherd Moons, it just embodies an idea. Now, Bjork was going through a very messy breakup at the time, so a lot of the lyrics are kind of sexual in nature, and also very complicated and layered. And on top of that, the production for this thing was probably one of the most interesting I got to read about. It lasted 4 years, and Bjork spent a lot of time trying to make it so that way this album would sound good coming out of a computer, embracing the new technology. She didn't mind the idea of somebody ripping the songs onto their computer and listening to it in an MP3 format. However, hopefully you listen to it on a high bitrate MP3 format, because the dynamic range on this album is amazing. You'll get these whispery, quiet portions of the album, and then suddenly these big, loud, epic moments come in. You gotta have your volume dial ready for this one. She also had brand new instruments invented in order to get some of the textures that she was going for, and that's pretty fucking cool. Every song is amazing, especially like the track It's Not Up to You. Every time listening through songs from 2001, that's always part of the list. I was just really blown away with this album. And that about does it for pop. We'll see you next time when we talk about that hippity hop music.